Salve Regina, Mater misericordiae, vita dulcedo, estes nostra salve.
The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer greatly from the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. Then Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him. God forbid, Lord, no such thing shall ever happen to you. He turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are an obstacle to me. You are not thinking as God does, but as men do. Then Jesus said to his disciples, Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. Whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What profit would there be for one to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? Or what can one give in exchange for his life? For the Son of Man will come with his angels in his Father's glory, and then he will repay all according to his conduct. The Gospel of the Lord. Last week, Peter here was the rock star of the gospel. He got it right, announcing Jesus as the Messiah. There was a divine insight given to him, and he saw with clarity who Jesus was. And yet, there was a flaw in the picture he had in his mind. And so today, he goes from being a rock star to a rock that doesn't roll, I guess we could say. He goes from being a rock star to a stumbling block. He moves from being a rock like a big building block that Jesus wants to use to build his temple. That's really a picture of every single one of us in Christ. That we're each a building block to this magnificent temple. But yet, when misplaced, these building blocks can be an obstacle, a stumbling block. And the thing that's the stumbling block for Peter is the gospel's hard. It's not easy to be a Christian. It's not easy to be a Catholic. But in our life, lots of things are hard, aren't they? And so Peter is awakened. And you can hear the echo of Jeremiah ringing through this gospel thousands of years before Peter. You duped me, Lord, and I let myself be duped, and everyone mocks me. Oh God, I didn't consider it would be this difficult. In the movement of a profound occurrence in my heart, I decided for Jesus, but now it's hard. It's hard to be a Catholic and live by the Church's teachings, especially in the world that has become so opposite to everything about the gospel. It's almost today, at least by our standards, as a Catholic people, it's almost today that like good is bad and bad is good. It's also hard to love my neighbor. I often am amused by the fact that there's only 3 commandments to dictate our relationship with God. We need 7 to look out for each other. That says a lot. So Jesus begins to show his disciples that he has to suffer greatly. He's going to be killed and he's going to be raised on the third day. This is what it is to be the Messiah. To lay your life on the line for your bride, the church, for the one you love. And Peter, he's not comfortable with this. And so Peter takes Jesus aside and he rebukes him. Here, the rock star becomes the stumbling block. But really for Peter, it's a conflict in loves. Peter cannot stand to hear about some type of violence coming to this dear Jesus who he has given his whole life to now. He can't stand the fact that his friend, his Messiah, could be hurt. And he wants to save him from this cross. It's a powerful love, and yet at the same time, it is misplaced. Jesus, on the other hand, in his love, is willing to suffer and die as the Messiah to save Peter and the whole world from sin. Because sin must be destroyed, but in the sacrificial offering of the love of Jesus Christ. Analogously, you might think of it this way. A mother chooses to deliver her baby when she's told she may die giving birth. But the husband protests because he's torn over the thought of losing his wife. My, what a predicament to be in. You are not thinking as humans do. Jesus tells Peter, you are not thinking as God thinks. You're thinking as humans do. You're giving into that reverse good and evil. And so Jesus now turns it up a notch. He's not giving in. Whoever wishes to come after me must take up his cross and follow me. I was thinking about my parents on their wedding day. I'm sure my mom had no idea in the furthest corner of her mind that she would take care of my father through years of cancer and Alzheimer's. It was hard, and yet it was love. One of the most profound experiences of love that I had is when I saw my mother in my father's last couple of weeks. She was giving him a sponge bath, and she caressed his face and kissed it and said, "Mo, have you ever seen a more beautiful man in your whole life?" And so Jesus goes to the cross for us. And he calls us to embrace the cross for him and be there for one another. It's funny, yesterday I went to the 25th anniversary of a couple whose wedding I celebrated 25 years ago. First of all, I was surprised that their children were very insistent that I would be invited and would be there. Because I'd been out of touch with them for a while. I didn't really know too much about how they were doing. But I was so impressed by the faith of the family, and you could see what it is that was the glue that was holding them together. It was this type of love. And it only comes through the work of love. As Jesus says, we have to take up our cross and follow him. Here's a sober point of truth. The ecstasy of the mountaintop is never realized without the valley of decision and the arduous ascent of the climb. It's work to get to the top of the mountain. And yet, that is where the real love is when you stop and think about it, isn't it? It's real easy to love when it feels good. It's really easy to love with the sun splashing and the breeze blowing in your face at the top of a mountain. But to be faithful in the climb, and to be faithful buried in the valley of decision, this is where Jesus says, take up your cross and follow me. I did it for you because I love you. Would you do it for me in love for me? And so for the love of Christ, we take up our cross. And this isn't just for married people. I see people among us who have been single parents and are taking up the cross. I see single people in our assembly who've been struggling to find themselves and to find their vocation, and yet still faithful to Jesus, trusting that he leads along the way. And so we take up our cross. We take up the cross of following Jesus, even if the world is against us, because we don't think like the world. We don't think as the limits of humanity, but we think in the expanse of what it is to be superhuman, with the supernatural power of Jesus Christ flowing in us because of our baptism. A resource we may so easily forget in the difficulty of the climb. We take up our cross of following Jesus in love of neighbor. Right now, that seems to be, maybe nobody's putting the name on it, but it seems to be what is holding Texas and Louisiana and Tennessee together. It's the love of God and neighbor being poured out for the assistance of those who are in need. And strangely enough, have you noticed in the media, all the bickering has stopped? It's kind of like somebody's been editing all the media of the bickering and negativity and focusing on the beauty of what it is to be a good person, a generous person, and help one another out. This is the cross. It's too bad it takes tragedies like hurricanes to bring us back to what we need to be and the truth of who we are. You see these effects, and you know the truth of what Jesus is saying here. Because what profit would there be to gain the whole world and lose your life? But that is the fate of a life without Christ and the grace to carry his cross for love of God and neighbor.
Regina Celi, letare, alleluia, qui aquam meruisti portare, alleluia, resurrexit sicut dixit,